by generating quite a bit of heat, and they do so by having a very high metabolism. These little animals eat about 25 to 30% of their body weight every single day. So that's quite a bit of food for such a small animal. Really important that they have access to all the seafood they can eat out there in the kelp forest. They can keep up with that metabolism, which allows them to generate heat to stay warm. Now, sea otters have a few adaptations that help them with foraging or finding their food out in the kelp forest. One of those adaptations is that they're one of the few mammals to actually use tools when they're eating. So a tool of choice for a sea otter is going to be a nice flat rock, and they'll carry that rock around with them and use it to crack into the hard shells of crab, abalone, and clams as well, so they can get to the meat inside. Now here at the aquarium, our sea otters will use the rock work around the habitat here as well as the windows to crack open their food. There goes Oswald demonstrating that right on cue. So keep your eyes open for that as we're feeding. Now sea otters only have two little paws to hold all of this stuff with, right? They have to hold on to all this food as well as their rock. So you can imagine it can be a little hard for a sea otter to juggle all of these items, but they do have an adaptation that helps them with holding or carrying things. So Oswald's up at the window there. Try to find where his armpit might be, right? Right underneath his forearms there, where his paws are, right in that area. He actually has extra folds of skin. You might be able to see it if he's at the right angle. And he can use those extra folds of skin much like we use a pocket. So he can store things in there. So what sea otters will do is they'll dive down the kelp forest, grab all the shrimp, squid, clams, all that food they're wanting to eat, and they can shove it into those pockets until their pockets are nice and full. Then they'll come to the surface, spread everything out on their chest and their stomach, and have a nice, tasty meal. So it's a really cool adaptation, very useful for these animals out there when they're foraging for food. So sea otters are considered an endangered species even with all these adaptations that we went over. And sea otters were hunted to the brink of extinction during the fur trade, which occurred in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Nowadays, sea otters are no longer hunted. They are a protected animal, but they're still trying to make a comeback to all the areas they used to populate before the fur trade. Nowadays, you can find sea otters have returned to certain areas that do include off the coast of Alaska, British Columbia, Washington, California, and even parts of Russia. But unfortunately, the sea otter has not returned to the Oregon coast. We don't actually have a permanent or resident population of sea otters that's thriving here in Oregon currently. We'd love to have sea otters come back to the Oregon coast. They're really important to having a healthy marine ecosystem. They keep the balance of all the animals and organisms that live in the kelp forest. So if you have a sea otter in the ocean, you know you have a healthy ocean. So of course you want that back on the Oregon coast. Now there are some things that you guys can do every single day to help wild populations of sea otters. And that's just being mindful of how much single-use plastics you're using. So if you're one who tends to use reusable bags, that's great news. If you are one who tries to use those coffee mugs, reusable coffee mugs, we do encourage all of that. And the reason behind that is that single-use plastics like plastic bags or plastic coffee cups are really harmful to animals like the sea otter. They can mistake it for food, and we don't want them ingesting it because that would be no good for them. Well, everyone, I'm going to be stepping off the microphone here, but if you stick around, we're going to be working on some extra training with our sea otters. We have our dominant sea otter, Schuster, here, who is in charge of these other two boys here. It's a natural hierarchy that we have here at the aquarium. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get our other two otters comfortable with moving Schuster around so we can move him